Welcome to How to Relieve Your Christian College's Revenue Pain, the Higher Education Development Outlook 2017 from Advocacy and ABHE. I wanted to talk briefly as we get started. My name is Paul Martin. I'm president of Advocacy. I want to quote Samuel Chand in his book Leadership Pain, The Classroom for Growth. At some point, you'll stop seeing pain as the enemy and make peace with it. Like Paul, you'll see pain as a surprising source of strength. God's power, Paul learned, is made perfect in weakness. And that comes out of 2 Corinthians 12:9. So pain is no longer the enemy, and we make peace with it. And that's the pain we're talking about in fundraising. We are very happy to say that ABHE and Advocacy worked with Bible colleges across North America to develop this study and to field the study with completed surveys among presidents, chief development officers, assistants, in-depth interviewees. 10 college presidents gave us some in-depth information. We're very thankful for everybody who participated in the study. Let's take a look a little bit at who all was that. Presidents and chief development officers from 71 Bible colleges provided data. Very high response rate. 49% of everyone invited to the survey responded. That's a remarkably high rate. It represented colleges in 29 states and 6 Canadian provinces. Outstanding. I wanted to let you know that as we work on the key findings of today, would be that you'll find as we work together today will be on vision casting, annual fund, major donor programs, donor acquisition, board fundraising, and planned giving. Now, you may have a question that as we go through the survey results today, that you would want to make certain that we know about. On the bottom of your screen is a little idea button, and it should be the second icon to the right. It looks like a balloon that a cartoon would have. If you would just click that, and over to the right, you'll see a group chat box. Please feel free to ask your question there. At the end of our time together, Dr. Verts will do his best to get to it, to answer it in our limited time. In fact, let me introduce our speaker for today, Dr. Paul Verts. Paul Verts is a remarkable man. He's an educator, leader, researcher. In fact, he has been a long-time student of understanding donor behavior and how organizations attract donors. He's been a leader at the college level. He's been in the classroom, but moreover than anything else, he's passionate about taking the gospel to people. Dr. Verts will be presenting today his results from the Biblical Higher Education Development Outlook. There will be several reports that will come out of this. Today is just the first of many. Dr. Verts, may I turn it over to you?
Appreciate the opportunity to share with all of you. I looked at the list of those of you who are viewing the webinar, and I see you really stretch from coast to coast. So we indeed want to welcome you to this time. Let me first start with the whole discussion of the case for support. It has been our experience that those organizations that are able to make a strong case for their support are those that are able to raise that support. And of course, an important part of your case for support is your ability to articulate very well the vision for your institution. So as we did our study, one of the questions that we asked of you presidents and chief development officers was, how would you briefly state your case for support? How would you state your vision for your institution? And what we have done is we've created what's called a word cloud based on those open-ended responses from presidents. And you'll see here, the larger the word, the more frequently that word appeared in your responses. So we have Christian and college and vision and kingdom and university and community institution. There are a number of words like that that tended to come to the forefront very quickly as we looked at this word cloud. Then we did something else. We next looked at the same word cloud for chief development officers. And there again, you will see words such as servant leaders, students, world impacting, Bible college, ministry, biblical worldview, and so forth. So we thought it was interesting. Then what we did is we set side by side the two sets of word clouds and said, what does this tell us about your ability to state the vision for your own institution? And we found something interesting that I think is worth discussing briefly. As we looked at these keywords, we found that presidents were most likely to use institutional, sort of big picture orientation words or phrases. We also found that chief development officers were more likely to refer to student students or student outcomes. And it is coming out of that particular analysis, we would recommend that it's very important to have a unified outcomes based vision statement. And we believe that is very important in attracting donor interest. So we thought that was rather interesting finding just slight differences between presidents and chief development officers in their statement of vision. Now, we want to move on to discussing what we have referred to in the title as our revenue pain points. And before I go on, let me just stop and give you a little story. Recently, I experienced some pain in one of my wrists. So I went on WebMD and they show you a picture of a body and they say, so where does it hurt? And they showed you the human body, and then you were supposed to click on the part of the body. It first took me to the arm, and then it took me to my wrist. And then they started asking a series of questions. What kind of pain is this? How severe is this pain? So, what they were doing is trying to diagnose sort of where this pain was, and then they gave you a list of possible uh, uh, diagnoses, and of course you can click on those and find out some way to alleviate that pain. Well, we've done somewhat the same thing in that we ask you about a number of challenges when we've used the term pain points, but a number of fundraising related challenges that you face in your institution. And these were rated on a 4 point scale from very important to not important at all. At the very top, and not surprising to us, was student enrollment. But as I go down through this list, I'm not going to comment on each one, but just hit a few of the most important ones relating directly to fundraising. That is, an aging donor base was rated second in importance. Christian influence to society, there's not a lot we can do directly about that, but communicating with and understanding Gen Xers and millennials and how we can get them to give to our institution. That was an important issue for you. A shrinking donor base. Many of you said that's something. Yeah, we're dealing with. Alumni not giving is particularly important in Bible colleges because many of your alumni go into ministry. The next one or two, there's nothing much we can do about, but you can go on down the line and you begin to see some of the important factors that and challenges that you all are facing as you try to raise funds for your institution. So, our question then, as we move forward, and we're going to be looking at several of these, what pain indicates an obstruction in your revenue growth? And we hope as we go through a number of these different topics, you'll say that that's something that we really do need to work on. The first area that we want to talk about is the annual fund, which usually is referred to as funds for operations. And we believe that the annual fund is very important, and growing the annual fund is very important for growing colleges. One of the things that we asked you as you got into the questionnaire is how many of you in fiscal year ending in 2016 actually met your annual fund for gift income. And we specified gift income because some colleges will put tuition revenue in there as well as gift income. But we wanted to narrow just to the gift income. We found that just slightly more than half of the Bible colleges that responded met their annual fund, but just slightly less than half did not meet the annual fund goals, and which of course leads us to conclude that this is an area where a lot of work needs to be done. So we simply state, and we're going to be a little more specific than this in the slides to come, that we really need to work on employing uh, proven methods for increasing one's annual fund. The one of the questions or one of the observations that we heard from many of those who completed the survey is that we have a small and in some cases a shrinking donor pool. And one of our first questions is, what are you doing to acquire new donors? So we asked this question: how frequently does your institution put together a campaign or an initiative to acquire new donors? About 43% said we don't have such an initiative, such a program. Another 15% said, well, it's less than once a year. We don't know what that means. Could have been once every few years, but it's sort of an indefinite amount. But if you add those two numbers together, nearly 6 in 10 of our Bible colleges do not have an initiative specifically to acquire new donors. We all know that people pass away, people retire and aren't able to give like they were before. So it's important for us to continue to acquire new donors. We also found, as we did some cross tabulating of the data, that colleges with no or infrequent donor acquisition were less likely to hit their annual fund goals. And that, I think that makes a sense to all of us. But we would really stress the importance of having a program to go out and acquire new donors all the time. So we encourage those of you who do not have a new donor acquisition program to really seriously consider that as you move forward into the future. Now, of course, as we talk about acquiring new donors, one of the questions that comes about, well, where do you find them? Well, we asked you what the best sources were for new donors. Now, we gave you a list of, I think, 10 or 12 different ways to acquire new donors, including social media, website, etc. What we've selected here are just the top five in terms of numbers of respondents who said, yes, we use this source. The most popular one was current donor referrals at 76%. 74% of those who responded said we use alumni lists. 66% events, 64% local churches, and then 62% staff and family and friends referrals. And again, there was a long list, but these were the top ones that were suggested. So we think probably your next question was, well, which of these would produce the largest number of new donors? And so we ask you to rank the productivity of these various means of acquiring new donors. And what we found number five was alumni lists. Now, many colleges think that's probably their best source of donors, but those of you who responded said, well, not so much. It's not tops in the list. Number four was staff, family, and friends referrals. Number three was current donor referrals. That is, a current donor introducing you to a donor that they think or a person they think you would be interested in giving to your organization. Number two was local churches. And then number one was events, and there could be alumni events, could be a wide variety of events. We'll talk a little bit about those in a minute. But One of the things that we would just point out looking at this is maximize events and church presentations for donor acquisition. Again, that the church presentations will probably be a bit more effective for those of you who are affiliated with a denomination. But still, churches become very important. So, one of the things that I wanted to share with you is an example from one of the presidents that I interviewed last summer about this. He said, years ago, we used to have 4 or 5 outside groups come in and use our facilities for various kinds of meetings. And he said, we enjoyed that. But he said, we have over the last few years really begun to open up our campus and encourage a lot of different groups to use our facilities. And he was in a medium-sized city. It wasn't a real large city, but he said the only stipulation we make is that I, the president, get to come in and welcome people to our campus. And then he said, I also stipulate that I want to be able to encourage people to include the college in their giving. And he gave me a number of examples of some of the things that they were doing. And he said, now we have over 200 such events on campus every year. I believe the number was 250. And said it's just been really, really interesting. He gave me an example of a group of elderly ladies who were meeting on campus. They are quilters. And so he said, I went in and these dear ladies, I thanked them for for using our facilities and welcomed them. And then he said, I just said, now, ladies, as you're putting together your estate plans, I would encourage you to include our college in your estate plans. And he said, guess what? We had 5 or 6 people, 5 or 6 of these ladies that contacted me and said, well, tell me more about that. And in that way, he was using an event to build his donor base. And he didn't tell me how many of those actually did include the college, but certainly gave him an opportunity to talk to a different group of people. So we have this whole notion of acquiring new donors is a key area that we really need to work on with about half of our college just not having any plan to acquire new donors. But there's another area that we look at as well, and that is reactivating what we call lapsed donors. And one of the questions we asked you in on the survey was, how many of you have a program for reactivating Libans, that is, gave last year but not this year, or who gave some year but not this year? Libans and Sibans, to use the terminology frequently used. How many of you have a program for that? And slightly less than half of the Bible colleges have a program to reactivate lapsed donors. And we think that is a missed opportunity. There are people who, frankly, they don't remember how frequently they give. One of the things that we asked you to tell us was, what are the most productive methods for reactivating these Libans or Sibans, or more generally, we use the term lapsed donors. And you'll notice on the table on the right, about 78% of you said, well, we find that targeted direct mail is the most productive way to reactivate lapsed donors. Others of you said, we continue to invite people to events and we encourage them to come to choir concerts and other such things on our campus, athletic events as well. Phonathons are particularly a good way to reactivate lapsed donors. Now, I've been in a number of organizations where the staff has said, oh man, we hate telemarketing. Oh, we don't want to do that. And my response is, okay, folks, let's try it, because what really matters is how well it produces and reactivates donors. And to the surprise of almost everyone, it is a good way to reactivate lapsed donors. Also, some of you just said, well, we just keep sending them the same direct mail. And of course, one of the things you can do that is insert a paragraph or two in a direct mail letter that directly addresses the lapsed donors. Now, one of the things, just a word of caution, we in our communication with these folks, we do not use the term lapsed donors. We early in my career, we made that mistake, and people said, "What? I'm not. Well, I just gave a few months ago," and then of course we look at their giving records. And lo and behold, it was a few months ago. It was like 24 months ago. And so people lose track of how frequently they give. So we use phrases like, "Hey, we haven't heard from you in some time," and something like that that softens it a little bit, that reminds them that we want to continue to hear from them. So this is an important part, we believe, of building your donors and increasing your revenue, and that is reactivating those who gave to you at one time but have not given to you recently. So these are a couple of the areas in the annual fund that we find important for us to explore, both finding new donors as well as reactivating old donors. So our major question for you is, what are your next steps to increase your annual fund? Again, when half are not meeting their annual fund, it indicates there is a serious need there. There's another area that we have explored, and as Paul Martin referred to a little bit earlier, that is in the area of major giving or major donors, both for the annual fund and the capital campaign preparation. We find a number of colleges don't really think about their annual fund, or their acquiring major donors, or trying to find major donors to help support the annual fund, but only capital campaigns. But really, both are major donors are important for both. When we ask how many of you currently have a program to identify and cultivate relationships with major donors. And by the way, major donors is defined differently for some institutions. It's people who've given $500 in a total year, or in other institutions, it's $1,000. And the real big ones, it's much more than that. But 500 to 1,000 is usually the definition of what constitutes a major donor. But when we asked the question, we found that just slightly less than 4 in 10 actually have a major donor program that is designed to cultivate those relationships. So that means about 6 in 10, a little more than 6 in 10, do have no major gift program. And we think that that's a real drawback in your funding. And you don't have to have a capital campaign in place to be able to initiate a major donor program. So, of course, our recommendation is that we move ahead with either initiating or upgrading a major donor program to develop funding relationships, both for the annual fund and capital campaigns. And I would continue to stress that the major donors can help you with your annual fund as well as with your capital campaign. Now, as we begin to do a little deeper analysis on the data, we looked at colleges who, again, looking at their ability to raise funds, looked at their overall fundraising revenue. We divided you into two groups. One is those that are above average in raising funds, and those that are below average. And one of the things we found is that the above average people, colleges with above average fundraising, 54% of those had a major gift program, whereas for those that were below average, only 33% had a major gift program. And so this, of course, helps to, I think, reinforce the importance of having not only that annual fund, which usually refers to smaller gifts. A lot of your annual fund giving are smaller gifts, and they could be $100 and or $200, 250, and maybe even 50 or 100. But it's important to have these major gifts as well, major givers as well for your annual fund. So our ongoing commitment then and encouragement is that you continue to initiate or upgrade your major giving program to grow more income. Now, one of the questions that so many of you ask, and it's an excellent question, is so how do I know which of the donors that I already have access to are major donors? And we say that's a great question. And one of the things that we have been worked with another company to develop is a way to estimate giving capacity, and we call it giving capacity screening. And there are methods to do this. And if you want to know what some of those are, you can contact us and we can let you know how to go about that. But when we ask that question, fewer than 3 in 10 are using any kind of giving capacity screening of their existing donor base. And we think, again, huge opportunity there that is being lost. And what really surprised us is that half of the institutions who say we do have major donor programs, they're not using gift capacity screening. And that's one of the things that we think will help you. And the remedy, as we say, is to be able to use this gift capacity screening because it helps you decide which of the donors you need to be talking to first. I remember working for an organization where one of our major gift officers wanted to go out and talk to everybody who lived in one town who had ever given a gift. And we said, you really need to target your efforts to those who are higher capacity. So we would encourage you to use this gift screening to prioritize your major donor cultivation. Well, that's a whole area that we think needs to be developed here. And another issue that we probed in our questionnaire was how much time do you, whether president or chief development officer, how much time do you spend cultivating major donors? And what we discovered was, and we gave some ranges there, but we discovered that 4 in 10, or just slightly less than half, said we spend about 20 to 30%, 20 to 29% of our time cultivating major donors. There were a few out in the on the far right hand side in the 40 plus hours. I believe the one individual that topped the list was spending 80% of his time in major donor cultivation. Well, our recommendation to those that we work with is that the president and chief development officer should be spending more like 50 to 60% of their time in major donor cultivation. And as you can see, that we're not there. We're quite far from that. Looking at the data that we collected, so only 42% are say they're spending 20 to 30%. So this is a huge area for presidents and chief development officers to include. Now, as we talk to some of our presidents, I know I had these 10 in-depth interviews, and the president said, the biggest challenge I face is that I keep getting pulled into internal issues, whether personnel issues, whether student life issues, whether faculty issues, program issues, and people just keep wanting me to get involved in those. And I think the best of the fundraisers, presidents that I spoke to, just said I have to continually resist the temptation to get deeply involved in internal issues, and I have to tell my assistants and my VP for advancement or my director of development, make sure that I have a lot of contact with people among our major donors. And this is a huge challenge for many, many of our leaders. I remember talking to one president who said, he said, I just want you to know, he said, I have the mindset that every day I must ask at least one major donor for a gift. He said, now I don't always do that, but that's my goal. And he said, when I set that goal in my mind, it really helps me focus on the fact that I can go out and talk to major donors. Faculty don't, staff members don't. And it really is the president and the director of development or VP for advancement that is out there with donors. They have that unique role that nobody else can fill. Well, as we've gone through this major donor area, we asked the question: how does your major gift program need to be strengthened? And we trust this gives you some ideas of ways you can do that. The next topic we want to talk about is the board and specifically leadership through fundraising. We believe there is a best practice that's been established in many institutions over the years, and that is the board needs to have fundraising as one of their key goals. What we asked you was first off, tell us on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for you that your board be involved in some way in fundraising? Well, we weren't really surprised when we found that on average, that was given a score of 9.04. So a lot of people scoring that an 8, a 9, or a 10. But then we followed that up by saying, okay, now tell us how effective on the same scale, how effective is your board actually in fundraising? Well, the score was considerably lower at 4.98. And as you can see, there's quite a significant gap between the importance of and the effectiveness. Is we put a number on that, a 47% gap between those two. So we find that boards are not really being effective in helping Bible colleges raise funds. But we followed that up with saying, what could we do to, or what could you do to remedy that situation, to pull those two ratings closer together, improve the effectiveness? Well, the most, and this was an open ended question, the most frequently stated thought was to improve general board training. Now, I believe a lot of those people were referring to development training, but they didn't use the term development. So I just put general board training here. But there were a number that said we've got to improve our development training of our board members, bring people in to actually help train board members. So you add those two together, that's nearly half said, boy, board training is really important. But the next category is important too, improve board recruiting. And what we've discovered is a lot of nonprofit Christian ministries are just recruiting board members, and they have not stated to their board member candidates, it's important for you to give to the organization, and it's also important for you to introduce us to those people who can give. And of course, this means that one of the things that we need to do in recruiting new board members is to recruit those who have means or who have contacts with people who do have means. As you can see, the next item, and by the way, there are a number of other suggestions here. We've just given you the top ones. We need to create an expectation that board members will give. So these are some of the things that we explored in terms of boards' involvement in fundraising. And our question for you is, how effective is your board in helping you with raising funds or development of funds for your institution? We have a couple more topics we want to cover uh, right now. The next one, you will notice that as we asked people what the fundraising related challenges were, or the pain points, as we use the term, one of the things that was pretty close to the top was an aging donor base, fewer older donors. And what we keep hearing repeatedly is that the baby boomers are retiring and it's shrinking our donor base. So we asked, one of the questions we asked on the survey was, how many of you have a planned giving or estate planning program, which of course is geared more toward older donors who want to leave some sort of a legacy? Slightly more than half do have a planned giving estate planning program, and a slightly less than half do not have one. So for a number of institutions, this is an area where you can continue to build support for your donor base. And we would encourage you to have that. And I think one of the things we need to do is to update some of this. And one of the challenges with planned giving or estate planning is there are a lot of technical and legal jargon in there. I think one of the things we need to do is continue to explore ways to be more creative in explaining what exactly those are. We also ask those of you that participate in the study, how effective do you think your planned giving estate planning program is? We got them like a 3.22 on a 5 point scale, which means barely positive. And so this is one area that we would really seriously encourage you to look at in terms of how you're marketing that to older donors, and especially with the whole emphasis on legacy giving, leaving a legacy for your children and grandchildren. And it's one of the great things that you can do is to have this planned giving or estate planning program. So, our remedy again is to address the aging donor issue with enhanced planned giving and estate planning program, and look for ways. And one of the ways, and I know we have a couple of our Canadian brothers and sisters with us today. We don't know the Canadian situation quite as well as the American, but there are ways in which donors can give directly out of their retirement funds to the institution, and we really encourage you all to consider whether that is possible in your environment. So, our question then is, how does your plan giving program rate when you look at the ratings that we gave from others? Well, those are the topics that we have time this morning and this afternoon to cover. But our question for you is, how much more funding could you raise with acquiring new donors? Second, how much more funding could you raise by reactivating donors who haven't given for some time, or we call them lapsed? The third one is, how does your major gift program need to be strengthened? Do you have one? And what ways could it be improved? We'd also like to encourage you to think about your board fundraising. What can be done to strengthen your board fundraising? Are you recruiting the right people to serve on your board? Many organizations, many nonprofit organizations, we recruit a lot of pastors and other ministry leaders, and they're wonderful people and they're godly people. But the question is, do they have resources to share with the institution? And the last question is, how does your planned giving program rate? Are you doing well with it? How would you rate its effectiveness? So altogether, we would encourage you to take a look at these five major questions and just ask yourself, if I were to tackle one of these, which one of them would give you the most traction for your college to improve the revenue that you are bringing in each year? Let me pass it back to Paul Martin.
Dr. Verts, thank you very much. The findings on this report are just the initial findings that you're seeing. There's quite a bit more information available. You'll see that released this year with research available that we will release throughout the year. One report to look for later this spring will be major gifts for Bible colleges. You've seen that we've spent a lot of time on that in this particular study. There's far more information available. The major gift area is one that most Bible colleges can grow in, both to initiate and to increase sophistication in. We see this as a major point for people to be able to grow their work at institutions across North America. Secondly, Bible college leadership best practices. These will be published later on this year. You will see it'll be a white paper format that would help understand what are those leadership best practices that are impacting the income to your institution. And the third research report that will be available later this year will be about donor communications. Dr. Verts touched on it, especially around the lapsed donor component, as well as some of the other annual fund practices. You'll see that that's what we're going to spend our time on in the third report as well. The donor communications and annual fund best practices for Bible colleges. Look for that late this calendar year. You'll also have available to you to download immediately if you would like, Abundant Harvest. This is about growing your major gifts program. Since we saw such a great need across institutions for maturing a major gift program at Bible colleges, we wanted to make this available free of charge to you. In Abundant Harvest, you'll see why major gifts. You'll see written major gift plan benefits. I know there are times where you need to make a presentation about initiating or expanding or maturing your major gift program. You'll see a lot of information about that in this wonderful book. or in this little publication. Planning for individual cultivation of donor relationships, and then also goal setting for major gift programs. You can download that report at advocacy.com/abundant harvest. Once again, that's at advocacy.com/abundant harvest. Now, if we have any questions, we can turn to your questions. Just simply type them into the chat box. Once again, you'll see on your just below your on the button bar, the icon bar at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a dialog box similar to a cartoon dialogue. Click on that and you can type in your question. And Dr. Verts, take a look at a question.
Acknowledge the fact that we've given you a lot of data over a very short period of time. We know you're very busy and all the work that you do to raise funds for your institution, and so didn't want to make this a real long webinar, but we do want to be able
Yes,
to help you in
runs
whatever
all
ways
the
we
time.
can to raise more funds for your institution, and hopefully we've given you a few ideas. As Paul intimated, this was a fairly long and extensive questionnaire, so there's a lot of data that we are still working on to analyze, and we'll be presenting to you over the next few months. But we appreciate the opportunity to share these with you. We also appreciate those of you who have participated in the study, answering the questions and digging data out of your systems to help us understand what some of the overall trends are. Just a comment or two in closing, and that is what we are finding at a number of institutions. And again, we work with a variety of nonprofit organizations. We find a smaller number of people giving, but overall giving is up. And one of the things that I would warn against is we quite often just look at total giving instead of looking at the numbers of donors. And we need to really look at both, because when as we have a shrinking donor base but an increasing amount of revenue coming in, we can fool ourselves into thinking we're really doing quite well. But we're that is a problem on the long run. You can sustain that for a short period of time, but in the long run, it's going to hurt you. So we would encourage you to look not only at the total dollars that are coming in, but at the number of people who are giving. And we encourage that, and obviously we encourage you to look at a lot of other statistics as well regarding your giving and to track those over time. Well, this has been a great opportunity to chat with you. Thank you so much for those of you who came and participated. Do appreciate it so much. And we just want to let you know that you can contact us again at advocacy.com/contact, or our phone number is there, 972-304-1100. And if you would like to have a copy of the slide deck of this presentation, if you would just simply drop a note to Lindsay, who sent you the initial invitation. Her email address is lindsay@advocacy.com, and she will shoot you a copy of this. But we will be generating the reports in the months to come. Thank you again so much for attending. We hope this has been helpful and has given you some insights, some things to think about as you evaluate your own program. Thank you again so much, and God bless. Bye bye.